Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the power of boundaries. Now, ask yourself this question. Are the people in your life right now respectful of the boundaries that you have? Whether it's you setting aside a certain amount of time each night to study for something, or you're working extra hours and you need that space and that time to really focus. Are the people around you in your life right now respecting that segment of time that you've set aside? Or maybe you started going to the gym or working on your fitness. Are they respecting maybe your diets and the new way that you're starting to intake food and different health habits that you're starting to implement in your life? Are the people around you respecting those boundaries? Ask yourself this question, because this is something that I realized I was lacking for most of my life growing up, and it has to do with our social conditioning. We're going to talk about that later on in this video, but the power of setting boundaries, especially as a young man, the sooner you can do this, the more awesome your life gets, okay? The faster you will reach the pinnacle of success and achievement in whatever area of life that is. If you respect yourself enough to set boundaries with those around you, the sky's the limit for you, I promise you. So with no further ado, we're gonna dive into today's video. It's gonna be an awesome video. You're gonna wanna watch it all the way through. You're gonna wanna rewatch it. So write down any timestamps that stick out to you so you can go back, and if you need encouragement through your journey, because life is a journey, there's gonna be ups and downs, hills and valleys, you've gotta come back and get charged up again. So you're gonna wanna write those timestamps down and watch all the way through this video to soak in this knowledge. So the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I was once a former nice guy and I lacked boundaries, and I'm sure you can relate to this. You know, as a former nice guy that lacked boundaries, I saw this growing up, and I basically replayed this in my relationships. Or if I liked a girl and she didn't really like me, I would still try to be a nice guy to her to win her love over when she clearly was just using me. And for most of us that were nice guys or trained to be that way, you can probably relate to this. So we talked about it briefly, but how exactly did becoming a nice guy that lacks boundaries, how did this even happen to you, right? Because so many guys struggle with this. Well, it stems from mommy issues, all right? Surprise, surprise. Guys love talking about how girls have daddy issues in this space. Me being one of them, I've talked about that countless times on this channel. But let's just keep it real, guys. A lot of us have mommy issues as well. So I don't want to hear us shifting the blame necessarily towards women all the time and start taking more accountability for the mommy issues that we have. Because reflecting back on my own life, I had a lot of mommy issues growing up, and from the emails that you guys have sent me, from the one-on-one consultations I take with you guys, a lot of you guys also have mommy issues. Just think about your relationship with your mom and the points that we're about to cover right now, and see if maybe some of them apply to you in your life and the parental roles that were displayed to you growing up, especially when it comes to your mother, okay? So number one, you watched your mom disrespect your dad growing up. So watching your mom being disrespectful to your dad as a child can psychologically make you be a weak man that has limited or holes in the boundaries he has for himself. And number two, your mom she babied you, okay? A lot of us came from single mother households where, yes, of course your mom loved you, but did she teach you really how to be a real man? Probably not. You probably were babied. She probably didn't want you to leave the house, and you had that support structure around you, which prevented you from taking on the world and embodying being a real masculine man, unfortunately. So let's break this down even more. I love breaking things down, and so do you if you're still watching. We always break things down it's probably because I have ADHD. I love breaking things all the way down to, like, you know, the molecular level if we're looking at an atom. So let's talk about this. This stems from our subconscious programming. What do I mean by subconscious programming? Well, during the years 0 from birth all the way to age around 6 or 7 years old, we're in what's called a theta brainwave state. This is practically like we're in a hypnotic sort of like trance. Any of you guys that have looked at NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, you understand that, or if you've meditated, when you get to around 10 to 15 minutes of meditation, you get into this very relaxed state where time almost doesn't exist. And this is this theta brainwave state that I'm talking about here. That's the feeling it creates. But when you're in a brainwave state like this, all your outside of environment, the relatives around you, the people you grew up with, the TV, your neighborhood even, the music that's being played around you, the commercials, the advertisements, and all these things from the outside world are planting seeds in your subconscious mind, which eventually lead to you acting out on those seeds when they come to fruition and they grow inside you, and acting upon that in the real world, taking actions. They also form your thoughts, emotions, and experiences later on that you habitually think. So a lot of the things that we do nowadays stems from our subconscious programming we received when we were from ages 0 to 7 years old, and the environmental factors around us that programmed us to be that way. So a lot of you, which you think is you right now, actually, it's not really you, okay? It's probably the relatives, the TV, the music, the ads, the people you grew up with around, the family. All of that has been programmed into you, and that's probably why you have weak boundaries. So I chose this picture because, I grew up in a household where my parents weren't necessarily planning on having me, and they argued a lot, okay? It was a stressful time for them, and unfortunately, I was subject to the arguments and the chaos that went around in the household. Yes, they tried to hide it as best as they could, but I still was a witness to that. And I'm sure if you grew up with a divorced family, you were also subject to arguments and this programming. And what happens is these arguments, they plant traumatic seeds in your subconscious mind, and those seeds, like we talked about earlier, will eventually sprout, and they'll actually be replayed later on in your life until you heal them. So let's take a look at what a trauma cycle looks like really quickly. The first thing that happens is there's a trigger, then we have an emotional pain that happens from the trigger, and then from the emotional pain, we have coping mechanisms that we go into. Mine was like biting my nails, being really shy, playing hours of video games by myself, being a bookworm, being totally a social recluse, which actually, as you can see, leads to a temporary relief, but it's only temporary. And then the negative consequences come right after the temporary relief, because you haven't actually healed the trauma or the emotional pain. You're just coping with it. And then that leads to shame and guilt because it's unhealed. And then the shame and guilt, once again, triggers you because it's still an unhealed trauma. So this is the trauma cycle and what it looks like. Think about right now, you can pause this and reflect on how maybe a trigger that happened early on in your life is now leading you to replay trauma over and over again in your life. Think about it. Take a time and really just think about, is a trauma cycle that I haven't healed or forgiven other people in my life from, is this still affecting me years later? So sticking to the script of why you might be struggling with setting boundaries with people in your life right now, you began believing after this trauma cycle has happened to you over and over again, and you've seen this displayed through your parents' relationship and the relationships around you in the media and the programming when you were younger, you began believing that women hold the power, okay? Women are sugar and spice and everything nice. You see it in Disney movies, the women hold the power, the man must sacrifice himself in order to, please the woman and put her up on a pedestal and do everything for her, because it subconsciously programs you that you have less or little value compared to her, and you are a workhorse slave for her. The second thing we as men have been programmed to believe is that we should sacrifice ourselves as men. Like that's something that's noble. And this happens because of Disney movies where you see, Prince Charming sacrificing all his glory and his throne and his kingdom just to go for the lowly Snow White or the princess and bring her up from the trenches and into his amazing lifestyle. But he sacrifices and he steps down and pedestalizes this know-nothing woman. And you see this in your own life with the men in your family, probably working hundreds of hours per week for a woman that doesn't respect them and just views them as a walking wallet. This is what most men are stuck in, just being a sacrifice their entire life. And quite frankly, this is what kills men before women. This is why guys die so soon, because they're in that sacrificial role like a slave. And they're not even unless it's like their birthday or Valentine's Day and they've been on their best behavior, they're not even having sex with these women. The third thing you begin believing is that nice guys don't set boundaries. Once again, this has been displayed to you. So you believe that setting boundaries is being mean and not a good boy. And also you're probably afraid that if you set a boundary with a woman, she's going to leave you and not give you any sex. So these are all the reasons you might be struggling with setting boundaries right now. It's because of your subconscious program. We just talked about it. Now we're going to look at the second reason why you might be struggling with setting boundaries in your life. The second reason is your mom, she probably babied you a little bit, okay? So here we have a disgusting, you guys have probably seen this grown man being treated like a baby. He actually believes he's a baby. If you've watched this on TV, I think you probably look it up on YouTube. And he lives his life as like a 2-year-old. And his mom feeds him a bottle, changes his diapers. It's disgusting, ridiculous, and we're going to talk about why this is and why your mom's probably babied you. You know, I'm not going to be blaming moms for this. We're going to just be looking at unfortunately, the psychological issues your mom probably has. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Of course, your mom loves you. So she probably doesn't want the world, because she knows the world's a tough place, especially as a man. She doesn't want the world to get to you. She wants to keep you happy as long as possible. Okay, that's because she loves you. So before we dive into why women do this and why moms do this, just know she probably came from a place of love. But subconsciously, she wants you to be her son husband, okay? She needs you to be her son husband, especially if she's a single mom. Because she most likely has trauma from her own childhood and the things that she saw growing up, or she might even have abandonment issues. Maybe her father left early on, or her mother left, or she was an orphan, and she has a fear of losing you subconsciously, so she babies you to keep you around her your entire life, in her grasp, because she feels in control when she's able to do that, because she never had any control growing up. So you're like a control petri dish of like a little let's just say like a little tadpole or something that's turning into a frog. She has you in a little petri dish that she can put away in the fridge after she's done experimenting on you, and she can just tuck you away, and you're always going to be in that little fridge, which is her house. Okay, hopefully that analogy makes sense. So we have to ask the question, is her babying you, is that real love, right? Is her sheltering you from the real world and what it means to take on masculinity and being a man? Is that real love? Is she really protecting you? Is she setting your son up for success in the real world by doing this? Ask yourself this question. Or is she inherently selfish? Is she just a selfish woman that wants to keep you for her own benefit because she feels lonely, because she's never healed her own trauma? Ask yourself these questions. Don't get angry, don't get emotional about it. Think back at your own childhood growing up. Why would she do this? So because of these mommy issues, you're now messed up. Your entire worldview is skewed because of your mommy issues. Let's be honest here. And you've been programmed to allow women now in your life as a grown man to cross your boundaries. And if women can cross your boundaries, that means other men can cross your boundaries. That means little kids can cross your boundaries. And women are repulsed by men that can't set a firm boundary and stick to this. And we're seeing more and more of these beta male type of men being born into the world today and programmed this way. But there's hope for you if you're watching this. So let's talk about how to regain your power as a man and set your boundaries the right way. Because there's always light at the end of the tunnel. No matter how dark it might seem, there's hope for you and me. So let's talk about the core principle that all men need to realize when it comes to setting firm boundaries and the power of boundary setting. Women naturally respect well-defined boundaries. When you say no as a man, you mean no and you stick to it no matter how she or anyone else feels, because you march to the beat of your own drum. And while you want to be a firm leader and rule with consistent boundaries, you also want to have boundaries that are reasonable and consistent. Okay, gentlemen, don't waver. If you don't like people walking around in your house with shoes on, you don't make a pass because she's a hot girl walking in your house for her to walk around with her shoes on in your house just because you want to get laid, right? You still set the same boundary you would with any other Joe, average Joe walking down the street, any other homie that you have in your house, in your space, in your car, in the way that she talks to you, in the way that she acts around you. You set the same boundary you would because you're a self-respecting man. And it doesn't matter how good looking she is. It doesn't matter that she has triple D's or double D's and she has a fat booty. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What matters is that you set a firm boundary of what is acceptable for you and you stick to it. You don't waver no matter how good she looks. And so many of us get caught up in a woman's looks and we let the disrespect slide because of that. And when you don't have boundaries, it creates a power vacuum. So I drew this nice little picture here of a man and a woman, but this guy has holes in his boundaries. His boundaries are represented by these dotted lines around him, okay? You can think of it like a sphere, but there's holes in it. So where he has boundaries with certain things, there are holes in boundaries with other things that he has. And because he's not consistent with setting boundaries, women, or I should put every type of person that he comes in contact with, but especially women, because they're so in tune to this and they will test you, she's able to fill in his boundaries that he doesn't have with her own set of boundaries and rules and principles and regulations, and soon she will control his entire system. So, like I talked about, this leads to a woman filling the vacuum with her own rules. And when a woman rules and she doesn't disrespect you, this is where we can see guys turning into cucks, okay? It doesn't just happen overnight. It's a slow takeover that she does. And these guys, of course, they don't want their woman sleeping around with another man, but because he has holes in his boundaries, over time, she fills in those holes and begins to dictate the relationship. And maybe he's a good provider, so she's going to keep him around to house her and keep her well fed and all of those things, the benefits that a beta male would provide, while she sleeps around with the alpha male. And maybe he even films it. Maybe he's starting her own OnlyFans. We've seen this, guys, with these weak men that don't have boundaries, and a woman just absolutely overtakes his life and dictates everything. And what can happen down the line is she eventually gets so sick of him that she puts out a hit on him. You've also seen that on Netflix if you watch these documentaries where women just get so fed up and disgusted by their man that they've walked over him so many times that they just put a hit on him, or they arsenic poison him. They just get rid of his ass. So in order as a man to set these boundaries, you have to understand what your role is, which is what we're going to talk about. Because if you don't understand what your role is, of course you're going to have holes in your boundaries that you set, which eventually will lead to other people overtaking your life and breaking those boundaries with you. So number one, your role as a man is that you must establish clear and personal boundaries. I like this picture that I drew. So I drew this picture right here showing that this guy right here, he has a solid set of boundaries and principles that he goes by, represented by this blue circle around him. And he doesn't waver or break from them, which means he's happy and she's happy even when she tests him and her tests are failing, and he sticks to his boundaries. That actually attracts and turns women on, that you're a man of principles, and it shows in a world full of simps that you actually respect yourself enough to stick to your boundaries and your principles and your morals and what you know is right, no matter what she throws at you and no matter how good she looks. You're not going to waver from that. You know what's right and you stick to it. Number two, As a man, you should maintain these boundaries consistently. That's a part of your role. So I love this picture right here. I don't know if this is from an old time movie or a movie, but it's a great representation of a man who looks like he's going out and his woman's trying to get him to stay at home or whatever, but he's a man on his purpose. He knows what he's going to do, what he needs to do. He carries himself like a gentleman. He's well dressed, and he's not going to let this woman beg and plead and manipulate him to stay, because this is what a lot of times guys do. They get into relationships and the woman wants to stay home with him all day and watch Netflix or whatever, eat ice cream. And he says, you know what, in order to keep this relationship and not lose this woman, I'm gonna, sacrifice some of my goals and things I should be working on so I can stay at home and eat some Ben and Jerry's on the couch with her. And eventually, she gets bored of him and leaves him. And the same thing that she said she wouldn't leave him for doing, which is like hanging out with me more at the house, she eventually leaves him for, because she realizes this man has no boundaries or principles that he can actually stand on. And she's repulsed by this. It shows that he's a weak, easily manipulated man, and he doesn't have a firm boundary. And how is he going to go out and conquer the world if he can't even set boundaries with a little 5'0" woman? He's not going to be able to do so in the real world. So she's able to peep game and see that ahead of time before it even happens. Number 3, you can't waver when boundaries are tested as a man. And we already talked about that. And point number 4 is you must be a leader rather than a follower. And it's a leader not just in your own home and in your personal life, but also at work and in every opportunity in life. Any room you go into, you must step into the role of being a leader and take it on. That's part of you growing as a masculine man. And I love this picture right here because it shows you in a dance, which is your interaction with women and the world, there can only be one leader in a dance, okay? There can only be one person getting twirled by the other. Who's gonna do the twirling and who's gonna get twirled in your world? Ask yourself that question. Who's leading your dance right now? Should be you. I also want to throw in this depiction of the male masculine lion leading the lion cub, and I'm assuming the pride is somewhere behind them, but they're following his lead. Okay, that's what I want you to see right there. No matter what, as a man, you're responsible for yourself and those that follow you, which is the woman and the children and anyone else in your life. You are the leader. That is a responsibility you take on. It's nature's assigned role for you. Don't waver from that. Don't be afraid of it. But what happens when you don't have boundaries? Okay, so we just talked about what it means to have boundaries. What happens when you don't have boundaries? Well, number 1, we see this all the time in the West. Women implement their own rules. You become subject to her dictatorship, and she's more of a tyrant than you'll ever be if you let it happen. You guys can probably look at some of the simps that you have seen in your life. Maybe it's a family member, an uncle, a cousin that's totally cucked out now, and he's lost his balls, and his wife controls everything in his life. And he can barely even be a guy around you anymore because he's just been neutered. And the woman has basically overtaken his throne. The third thing that happens is the relationship dynamic shifts, which we've talked about, and the power balance reverses. So instead of you being the leader as a man, she becomes the leader. And here we see it right here, this pathetic man being walked around like a freaking dog by his owner, because she owns you if you've allowed this. This is pathetic. This is to get to this point, it's just so disturbing that a man would allow this. But you'd be surprised at the fact that most guys are psychologically in this state already. And if their wife even wanted to, she could get damn near close to having her man, her male, beta male, do this, just for some box. It's pathetic. Seeing something like this, it's a ballless simp to allow this to happen. This is in London. It was all over the news. This happened like a few years ago, but still, it's just This is absolutely pathetic and disgusting display of, I don't even know. So the next thing we're going to look at is something I call the kingdom metaphor. And if you want to be a strong man, you must realize strong men, they create their own kingdom. They are the rulers. They sit on the throne in their own kingdom. They don't bow or act as a court gesture to those around them, especially women. While on the other hand, weak men, they live in her kingdom, in her castle, and they bow at the feet of their ruler. And this is a lot of weak men that get with these feminazis these days, and they bow and kiss the feet of the woman. They supplicate, they pedestalize her because they fear on losing the opportunity for intimacy with her. But they're too weak to ever speak up and be a man about what their true intentions are. So they go the roundabout way as a soy boy and try to get in through the cracks where they can as a friend. And so she knows this. She knows what you want before you even do any of this stuff. She just wants a real guy to be keeping it 100 with her. And you, as a weak man living in her kingdom, you're going the roundabout way, the simping way around her, when she knows that you're a man and you have needs and she wants to actually please you, but you're so weak and pathetic and ballless that you're too afraid to speak up and tell her what you actually want and make her submit. In addition to this, the frame determines whose throne you sit on. You're gonna sit on her frame and have a weak frame, or are you going to be a strong masculine man with principles and rules that doesn't waver, but you're not a dictator about it, and she has to be in line and submit to your rules, bow at your feet, kiss your feet. Leadership requires owning your space. Okay, so I chose this illustration, I drew this because this shows you that when you go out in the real world, let this stick figure represent you, you have a set of principles and standards that you go by, represented by A, B, C, and D in these boxes right here. And anyone that comes into your life, let's just say for this example, a woman comes into your life, you have to process and determine whether or not she checks off your boxes and your principles. And if she doesn't, let's say she only checks off, in this instance, boxes A and B, then she's got to go. She's got to get out of here. You know, she's not worthy of your time. It's going to be a waste of your time. It's going to be an uphill battle. She's going to want to fight and disrespect you constantly. So have your set of principles and rules in your mind when you go out into the real world every day. And those that don't fall in line and listen to the rules that you've set, get them out of your life and cut them off. So the key takeaway from all of this is, number one, set boundaries early. How you start, gentlemen, is how you finish. So you want to set boundaries as early as possible in the relationship, especially when you're taking on a masculine role. It shows you that you're a leader. Number two is you want to maintain this role and these boundaries consistently. You don't want to waver, like we talked about. Consistency and momentum is key. Number three, don't let others dictate your rules. A king would never take advice from the court jester or a peasant. So don't let others dictate how you should live your life to you. Number four, lead your own life and don't live in hers. Pretty self-explanatory. You don't want to drop everything you're working on because she's hot and drive across town for her, and stop working on building yourself and all of the things that you need to be doing as a man just for some hot chick, okay? You lead your own life, let her come into it or not. If she doesn't, screw her. Doesn't matter. Peace out, homie. I'll see you next time. There's more in line. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys. Like the video, get this video out to more and more guys, share this content to more guys so more people get this information, and hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications for more uploads. I love you all. Have a blessed rest of your day. I hope this video has helped you.